Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about 5 key areas that Creative Assembly should focus on from my perspective going forward in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, one of the areas that's not going to be on this list, but something that they have mentioned they will be looking to change is how control and corruption work in campaigns. Now, I'm highly skeptical of them handling that because it would be very easy to mess it up. And I'm not sure if the payoff is really there. Besides, I would personally prefer if they use those resources on different things with regards to campaigns. I'm not saying that control and corruption can't be improved, but suffice to say, I think there are bigger priorities. One of those priorities is with regards to sieges, and they have mentioned that they're going to look at what they can do with respect to them. But yes, sieges do need to be changed. And they need to be changed not just from the perspective of how they work as individual battles, but also the kind of campaign context. The amount of time it takes to construct siege equipment, the fact that you're spending any time whatsoever constructing siege equipment, when in reality, during the course of a campaign, you just want to conquer settlements as quickly as possible. And the thing is, you can. You can just show up to a settlement and attack it. Siege attacker is a thing, even if they remove it from Legendary Lords. There's a reason they added it to Legendary Lords, worth remembering that. But siege attacker is a thing. Even if you don't have it on Legendary Lords, you would still have it on certain units. And as long as that's the case and the dynamic remains the same, building siege equipment, besieging a settlement multiple turns is just not worth it. But on top of that, you also got to consider the auto-resolve, that you're disincentivized actually from fighting field battles, because field battles are where you're actually going to get the best auto-resolve result. Whereas in any siege, any settlement actually for that matter, will have an auto-resolve benefit to it. On top of that, if you auto-resolve a field battle, you eliminate the army, whereas with a siege, you do eliminate the army, you do eliminate the defenders, but you can also do so from a manual battle. Whereas in a field battle, you might not do so. So I think that kind of dynamic needs to be changed, and then of course the layout of settlements, the buildables, all of those aspects also should be changed. So from auto-resolve to siege equipment, to how they work themselves as battles, the AI behavior, the pathfinding, etc. All of these things do need to be addressed. It's not just one thing that's bad with sieges, it's the entire package of campaign dynamics and battle dynamics that make them less than fun battles. I mean, you do lose a lot of the things that make battles great in Total War, in the sense that you have less dynamic layouts, less dynamic battles, cavalry is not as important, certain units just won't work in sieges, etc. So at the moment, the best thing you can do with sieges is just get mods that remove them. Maybe that is the best solution from a siege perspective in the game. But it's something that they're hopefully going to tackle, and hopefully will tackle well. But yes, absolutely something that needs to be changed. At number 4, we have the research system. And I'm not talking about specific research trees that various races do have. That's an improvement on a race-by-race basis. But it's also the way we handle research in a campaign. So while research trees for many races do need to be improved, the problem that we do encounter in a lot of campaigns is due to the way the game is handled, due to the way the game is structured, and the way research works, because you can only research one thing at a time, you're heavily encouraged to focus on that one thing that is going to grant you the biggest benefit immediately. Not something that will grant you a specific benefit for certain specific units or a combat benefit, but more so a campaign benefit. So take, for instance, dwarves. If you're playing a dwarven campaign, the best way to play a dwarven campaign from a research tree perspective is you always get High King Authority, because this reduces construction time for provincial capitals and settlement building, so that means you can get settlements to higher tiers faster. It's also a growth benefit on the side. You also get an extra High King Decree. You also get rat poison over here in this tree, which gives you casualty replenishment. So you get High King Authority, you get rat poison, you may get Dwarven Grims, and then you're getting underway trade caravans, also loyalty, into basically Grand Throne Chamber and construction guilds. And that's something you do all the time. And regardless of the race you're playing as, regardless of the Legendary Lord you're playing on, you always have similar situations in every single campaign in the game. That is flat out not interesting. I do believe that it's fine to have certain research and certain units, certain economic builds to be better than others. But what I don't believe in is that we do have the system that where you're spending a lot of time getting certain things unlocked to the exclusion of other things. One of the races I think handles a research tree, or quote unquote research tree, very well is Kislev after their rework, because while they do have a traditional research tree, they also have the new supporter system, which is effectively a research tree right now. And I think that system in itself handles much better, because you get combat benefits with Ice Court, and you're getting campaign benefits with Orthodoxy. There's still combat benefits with Orthodoxy and campaign benefits with Ice Court, but you have two separate trees that you're getting at the same time, and that makes the whole thing more dynamic. So even though you would always get construction benefits and campaign movement range benefits with Kislev, what you choose to get, at least with Ice Court, is infinitely better and more interesting, because you have a lot of options, and there's not necessarily all the choices are clear cut. It depends on what you're doing in a campaign. It's more dynamic. It will depend on your situation, what you need in the moment. And because you can get a lot of things very quickly and you're not waiting dozens and dozens of turns to just unlock a particular research, that makes that entire system better as opposed to a traditional research tree. Regardless of what they decide or not to do with research trees in Warhammer 3, Kislev does show how they could reform the entire system in a substantially better way than what we have right now. At number 3, we have victory conditions. This is something that mods are trying to tackle at the moment, and really the problem with victory conditions is they're very flat. You have a short campaign victory condition that requires, generally speaking, for you to get 30 different settlements, gives you some kind of benefit. Many of the benefits are not worth it unless it's casualty replenishment or really the hero capacity, especially for races that do absolutely need that hero capacity, High Elves, for instance. But it is not really a dynamic or interesting system to go with in a campaign. And you do have really crazy victory conditions sometimes, even for short campaigns, like Tyrion requiring to kill both Morathi and Malekith as short campaign victory condition is especially painful in his campaign, because it does take time, but because he's lacking that hero capacity, it makes his campaign less interesting to play than someone like Alariel, who has a much more sensical short campaign victory condition. In terms of victory conditions, I think that the one good example of where Creative Assembly did it right is actually with Pharaoh. Because in Pharaoh, you have victory points that you earn. And your short, long campaign or very long campaign victories are gained when you acquire a certain amount of points. So you have those steps, and it's more dynamic, and you have theaters where you gain these victory points. And there's various ways. There's not just like conquest of territory, so that will give you a lot, but there's also economic victory conditions, defeating certain foes, recruiting certain things, etc., becoming, all powerful as a king in a certain region, or having certain settlements, certain landmarks that also give you victory points. So that is the way Pharaoh does it. And I do believe that Total War Warhammer 3 would benefit immensely from having a more dynamic system of victory conditions. And what's also sad is we kind of had like those chapters of victory conditions previously in Total War, and those have been removed. So I think it would be great to have chapters back at least. Like with Tyrion, say for instance, you're starting to play Tyrion's campaign as an example. For chapter 1 would involve, let's say, capturing 10 different settlements, right? And securing a certain area, like for instance securing Attain, getting an alliance with Ivres and Alariel, and then maybe dealing with Safri one way or another, either through an alliance or through conquest. And that would give you one hero capacity to all heroes, or maybe unlock a certain hero type, unlock certain unit recruitments faction-wide, irrespective of buildings. That's also something that they could do. Or just give you one unit, one high-end unit. Imagine if you're doing a quest, right, in a campaign, and you get one high-end unit as a reward, as opposed to just money and casualty or replenishment. which is what quests currently do. But imagine having a kind of chapter-based objective system where you do those chapters, and some of those objectives could give you one high-end unit that you could use. Now, you would have a capacity for that unit. Like, let's go even further on this. You would have that unit, you could recruit one of that unit until you get the structure for it, like, say, a Star Dragon. And then you could have that unit in one of your armies. And if you lost it, you could get another one with a cost, with a cooldown, kind of like how the Electrocount system works, Electrocount State Troopers work. But that would add so much variety and so much to a dynamic campaign experience, because just recruiting heroes, right, just increasing hero capacity could be a bit boring. So there's so many things they could do, like a research benefit, control benefit, all those kind of sweet benefits, not just money, casualty replenishment, or hero capacity. There's a lot of different options. In fact, I think Chaos Dwarves as a short campaign victory condition work very well because they increase your workload, like they increase your economy, they increase your hero capacity. It is not great, however, how it's handled right now. So I think that, I do believe that having more dynamic and just better campaign victory conditions system would work phenomenally well in the game. And number 2 is campaign customization that I think Creative Assembly should add in Total War. Now, the reason I believe they should add campaign customization does tie together with many different issues that do exist in the game. So one of the key issues that does exist in Warhammer 3 is the fact that you have this severe imbalance between races and various legendary lords start. So for instance, if you're playing Zaytan's campaign, then Zaytan's campaign in a lot of different ways is ruined just because of his starting position. He starts with the Valerie as a tier 1 settlement, and you're heavily encouraged to get it to tier 2 as quickly as possible. And the way you do that is you raise settlements to ground as quickly as possible. So all the settlements over here in the Eastern Steppes, I took them, but I also raised all of them for materials. And I spent money to reconstruct them, which meant I needed more gold than I otherwise would, which pushes you down a specific campaign path that works, but it's also not an especially engaging campaign path. You're using ambush tactics initially, you're raising settlements, you're always going down the Tower of Tsar to get Warmonger and those raw materials from Machinator. And this happens in numerous campaigns throughout Total War where you have this experience time and again, where you're always going to go down a different path. Now, there is a big problem, and the number one issue that I believe Creative Assembly should tackle on this list, but I think campaigns inherently would be more dynamic and interesting if they gave us the ability of making things faster. Like, imagine if they gave us the ability of starting a campaign for campaign customization with a lot of resources, just a big cache of resources. Pharaoh did that, and we would have then we would have like just ability of getting a settlement to tier 3, maybe even tier 4, maybe even tier 5 very quickly. And if we got slaves, if we got laborers, and if we had faster construction of settlements, because that's the cost of Chaos Dwarfs. Like, they construct things faster through instant construction, but they pay the cost that their default construction is slower, unlike Dark Elves. So it is partly a balancing issue, and I'm always going to argue in favor of the baseline being better. And it should be better for Chaos Dwarves, because Chaos Dwarves are designed in terms of the racial balance for Realms of Chaos as opposed to Immortal Empires, and it does make their campaign suffer. So that could be better from a lot of different perspectives. But instead of having the situation where, yes, it is ideal if Creative Assembly goes race by race, lord by lord, and improves the situation, you could then have players decide, okay, what do I want my campaign pace to be? What do I want my campaign challenge to be? Do I want a very fast start, but one that escalates to become progressively harder? Do I want, a slower pace, a faster pace to my campaign? Do I want AI factions to hate me more? Do I want diplomacy harder? Do I want it easier? And different facets of that. So I think campaign customization is the one feature that Creative Assembly should really add in the game in a similar way as they did with Pharaoh, and even better than they did in Total War Pharaoh. And if they do have CA Sophia, they should. Since they do have CA Sophia working on Warhammer 3 at the moment. It's one of the things I really liked about Pharaoh, and one of the reasons I didn't completely dismiss that game when it came out. While I do believe Pharaoh was one of the worst Total War games that came out, I could see the potential in it from the beginning, and that's one of the reasons Dynasties ended up being so good, because all the building blocks were there, they just needed to get them together. And I think they did in a lot of ways with Dynasties. It's not finished, and never will be probably, but damn, if that game doesn't have a lot of... It didn't always have a lot of potential, and that potential was really realized with Dynasties in a lot of ways. And then at number 1 on this list, we have to talk about the endgame. Because you see a lot of changes. You see a lot of discussion about to making longer campaigns better in Warhammer 3. Well, one of the issues, the chief issue actually, is that we don't have an endgame. We have AI factions, and CA may improve that, but we don't have a progressive difficulty, so the kind of cheats the AI gets are always the cheats the AI is going to get in a campaign, and the behavior is always going to be the same. So we don't have that strategic thinking from the AI, and we don't have an endgame challenge. Creating an endgame challenge has always been an issue. I've never felt the Mongols or Timurids were ever great. I never felt Attila was all that great, and then you have these endgame crises. They don't work. I think you could have a situation, some people have floated the idea around of, okay, maybe a faction becomes really strong. Like, let's say I'm playing a High Elf campaign or Empire campaign, Archaon becomes very aggressive, very large. If I'm playing High Elves, it's Dark Elves. Or you could choose. You could let the player decide. But you need to have an endgame mode. And by the way, speaking about endgame, and something somewhat related to that, we could also talk about the map itself. The map could use improvements, like more regions in a place like Bretonnia, but more importantly, with respect to longer campaigns and an endgame campaign, I think it would just be great if we could turn off certain sections of the map altogether. Because if we look at a map, right, let's say I'm playing, let's use the most baseline campaign, right, Karl Franz. If I'm playing a Karl Franz campaign, do I care about this entire section of the map? With the exception of maybe getting Marcus Wolfhard as a Confederation option. I do not, whatsoever. So if I could turn off this entire area of the campaign map, you could consider this endgame, you could consider this campaign customization, but if we could turn all of this off and everything to the east off, that would vastly improve campaign performance, and you'd still have the campaign that you're meant to be played. And so I think, dependent on a campaign, like let's say, what they should do is like give us those options, but also go for every race, every legendary lord, and choose and it recommends some settings. Like if you're playing a Kislev campaign, you would be recommended to turn off everything in Nagron, Ulfwan, and Cafe, for instance. Right, just an example right there. It would be a bit tricky with things like Astankia, Jan Bo, etc. to manage because of their dual starts, but I think it would be a really, really good feature to add to the game that would make longer campaigns better. So it's all about the end game here, about this point. That's all I had to say. Questine signing out, and stay tuned for more.